Okay, so separating waxes. What the hell have I done with the other one? Oh, there we go. Let me see if I can zoom that in for you all. So really, what happens with these, they just cut as a rotary pass, so it's only cutting from the outside. The wax is pre-cored with, I think it's a 15mm hole, so I have to file up the finger size on this sucker when I'm done. You can do it as an automated process, but it's just too much pain in the arse. Right, so what we've got to do with these guys, we have to decore it. The core is a little fellow in the side there that holds it all together to cut the outside details, in this case the grains on the shoulder of the wax. Once again, like I said, you could probably, and I actually do have a table mounted version of Brandt's Arbor where I can lift the piece over sideways 90 degrees and send a cutter in a profile operation to split the supports off. But the time it takes to code it, move the piece over, do the split, is longer than what it just took to do that. So it's all a question of, use the right tool for the right job. In this case, it's just that much faster for me, usual workflow, just to split off the supports and clean up the inside of the shank a little bit. You'll notice I'm using just regular jewelry tools, regular old fine file, because this is a regular wax. It works with all the normal tools, and also the upside is it generally casts better and has a better finish. So really, a lot of people say like, oh, I'm sure you post-process your waxes and you got all this and you make, you paper them down, anything, and that wax, oopsie, I'm going to get this to bloody focus, come on. Okay, that wax straight off the mill into the blaster. Actually almost no blaster at all, and that's as clean as it is. There's no post-processing, no papering the wax or polishing it. On some waxes I will throw it in the ultrasonic and actually run a little bit of lighter fluid in it, and the reason I do that is not to polish the outer surface, is sometimes there's compaction deep inside it. Compaction is little filaments of wax that come off the milling machine, and they'll be deep inside the piece where even a blaster is not going to get to without risking breaking the piece. So in the case of those ones, I'll hang them in the ultrasonic, make sure that the water is penetrated in everywhere, and then I'll pour a cloud of lighter fluid over the piece into the ultrasonic. It'll create a little cloud of the chemical around the piece and penetrate in where the small little filaments are and melt them sort of instantly without really affecting the outer surface of the wax too much. It can have a mild polishing effect on the wax, evening out tool marks if you do it often enough and at the right temperature especially. But generally speaking, with a milled wax, you don't need to clean up your surface. It comes out clean. So I'm going to quickly split these off, and then I'll show you how I core up the finger hole on the other one, because that can be dangerous. You can actually break the waxes. Come on. And then that last little guy. Okay. I like to split off the bottom of this with a little bit of there we go, with a little bit of the pip intact, so they've got something to sprue from. Okay, let's file up the inside of those, just to knock off the supports. Okay, and my wife has not been cutting far enough through the ground plane, so I'm going to have to open the holes on this just a tad, because I don't think they're open enough. They're not going to cast. Or we need to start using 6-degree cutters to do the fine detail top area so the holes open a little bit more, because these holes are way too small. Happily, because it's wax, it's not going to be an issue. So this is really the advantage to being able to do it yourself. You see these problems before they become problems on your workbench. Drill bits, drill bits, drill bits, drill bits, drill bits. No drill bits, no drill bits, no drill bits. Righto. Okay, there we go. Alright, so really what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to punch through. The hole is through, but because it's been cut with a tapered cutter and not deep enough, it's not big enough. The hole is like probably under 0.1 of a mil big through the piece, and what will happen is when you cast, it'll flood fill that section. You'll get a flash through the casting. So I like to just open it up a little bit if I can. Wifey dear, you need to make these holes bigger. Okay. Okay, that's that one done. Now let's do the other one. Never underestimate the power of being able to prototype your own pieces and see firsthand what the problems are with them. Because otherwise, it's cheaper to just have it printed. I'll say, don't worry, I don't need to prototype my own stuff. Have it printed, have your printer send it to casting, arrives on your desk, and you're going, oh shit, now I've got an hour to clean up stuff I didn't know was going wrong. So the CAD on this is perfect, but the reality is by the time it's been produced, there were some limitations in the technology which have showed up. Ball burr, there we go. So that's, I'm just touching off the inside so that's nice and clean. Okay, so some manual work. Righto. Let's check that. Now what I'll do with these, I'll just pop them in the Ultra just to take off these little burrs of wax and stuff. Alright, so that's pretty much that for those waxes. Let's pop them out the way. Now I've got to do this one. Now this is the problem one, because I've got to file up the inside of this to a size 0.5. Alright, so let's split it off completely first of all. This wax is fairly resilient, but if you drop it from high enough, you will break it. Let me see if I can put that in a bit of a closer zoom for you. You get a better idea of what I'm doing. Split that one off too. And the reason I'm splitting it away so far is because I'm not going to try pierce around the outside of the wax. If my wife has done this right and she's gone through the ground plane by about 0.5 millimeter, what's going to happen is if I just file up the inside finger size, I should go through the ground plane material which you see here. Okay, sorry there. And on that particular piece it's not a problem, but on a piece like this, where your rails on it are really fine, it can become a very major problem. You could quite easily snap this wax while handling it. Now, like I said before, a piece like this, you could cut it three-sided, like we did with these pieces with a core, but I don't know, sometimes it's just easier not to. I let my wife make decisions on which way around she wants to do that. So, size stick, we need an 0.5 on that. Okay, so let's start papering, let's start filing it up. So you'll see the filing motion and support is pretty much the same as it is with anything else. A lot of guys use a thing called a bud burr to go in and hack out most of this wax, or even the DU mat ring sizers, which has got the little blade in it, and you can just turn it around. I find that my workflow, and this is not bagging anybody else's workflow, just everybody's got their own thing. In my workflow I like to file it because I can see through the inside, you can see the light shining through. If you look inside there, you can see the light shining through and you can tell when it's about to break through. Whereas I think when you're working with a bud burr or some kind of other system where you can't see the inside of the ring, you're not entirely sure when your ground plane is going to come through, and just suddenly the pressure gives way and boom, goodbye ground plane, and you probably snap it in half with the pressure you're putting on it with your fingers. The ground plane normally comes away as like very light filaments. Okay, I think I'm probably pretty much through everywhere. Let's have a look. rough file. There we massage it now. Still got somewhat to go. I'm going to look at it from the top so I can see my edges. So as you can tell, if you never made jewellery, this step might prove to be difficult for you. So some people say to me sometimes, how come the milled wax is a bit more expensive than the printed wax? Number one is your surface finish is better. Number two is quite often it will require manual labour by me to finish the wax. Not all the time, but fairly often, you know. And as we know, in any system, the expensive part is never the mechanized part. It's always the labour component that's expensive. So I think I'm pretty much there. I like to leave these about a half size small so that it gives me some cleanup room when the piece is done. And what I should be able to do now is I should be able to just push, there we go, just push that ground plane out. It tears away nicely, leaving a nice clean section through there. Alright, so that's just pushed out. Then we move to a fine file just to get the inside nice and clean. Okay, and that's pretty much that. I have supports running through the middle of this because I'm going to cast them as one piece. And these will actually be split off after and become the side rails left and right of that. So let's do that one now. I'll try to split that off a little closer so I can see my ground plane. Now the reason that we have this, once again, to explain to those of you, I chose to do these pieces with what's called just a plain rotary pass from a solid tube. You could have pre-cored the finger size of the rotary tube to the right finger hole size. I have found that sometimes you have ellipsis on milling machines, and what that can cause is if you go to the exact finger size, that you have your shank thicker in one part than another, and you know, all kinds of issues like that. So I've developed this workflow. While it looks to be harder, for me it's actually easier. I find that it gives me a chance to see the wax before it's completed, number one, and number two, I'm still part of the workflow. It's not completely automated, so I feel like I'm still actually a jeweler. Okay, so we're just going through that. I might have to blast it a little to get rid of these interior segments. The red DU matte is a nice resilient wax. If you were doing this in the green waxes or the ferrous waxes, you'd probably be splitting this wax by now, or leaving finger marks, finger lines and stuff in it. So let's keep going a bit more. Okay, you can hear like a splintering sound. What the splintering sound is, little segments of wax breaking off here and there. So I'll try to bring that up so you can see that actually will start tearing off now. That will come off clean because you've gone through the finger hole. It's still tight a little bit there. I'm going to move to a fine file now, and you should start seeing pieces just fall off because you've gone through the finger size. So quite important when you're setting your ground planes in Desperado or RhinoCam that you actually get your cutters to go through, because otherwise you have a nightmare of trying to clear out these little bits of wax afterwards. Let's go through. A little bit more. There we go, there fellas. Go squidging more. And I think that's probably pretty much there. Yep. Okay, so final knock off. Got to go up about a half a size. Then a fine file to clean it up. Alrighty. It's been cast in platinum, so you don't want to leave too much excess material, because otherwise you're just paying money for nothing. So I like to get it pretty close. That's pretty much that. Alright, so the little filaments over there will come off in the ultrasonic. What I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to go stick it on the blaster quick and I'll bring it back. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Job done. Alright. So yes, there is still some manual component when you're using a milling machine. You can automate these tasks 100%, just depends on how much of your workflow you want to automate. I'm not a big believer in automating stuff too much, because it just means that you're not part of that process and you can't tell when problems have slipped into it. This has been debated quite a bit on 3D CAD about the inability to check your A or your Y in between passes on certain mills. Anyway, so I hope that was useful to someone. Let's grab those waxes one last time while I can see what I'm doing. So what I'll do now is I'll just give these a bath in the ultrasonic, and that's pretty much them done. So those are the ones she was busy with last night. The other ones have already gone to casting to Apex. And by the way, if you're going to do platinum casting, Jesus, do it with Apex, because lately, anyway. Cheers, Chris out.